welcome to the Integration Station. I'm Michael, a child adolescent occupational therapist, and with me today is Eleanor, who is also a child and adolescent occupational therapist, clinical director at OTFC Group, and my boss. Eleanor, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Michael. What an introduction.
Thank you. We'll be discussing how best we can support the young people in our lives and find the fun in learning these things. So our format's going to look a little bit different. We're going to take some questions, some way hopefully provide some insight from our discussions. So for those who have tuned in before, it will look a bit different, but we think this might be the best way to reach our audience and get the information out that we want. And there are ways to get that information to us. So send the questions. You can send them via Instagram. I think it's at OTFC Group, or old-fashioned email, which does work. I checked it this morning. Got a meme from producer Eli. Thank you, Eli. And that's podcast@otfcgroup.au. So on today's show, we were going to cover a few questions with topics ranging from finding a job, or how does an OT help to find a job, all the way through to Continence Care Plans.
Yeah.
Eleanor, this is your first time on the podcast.
Yeah, it is.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling okay. This is a little bit different to the usual formats that I usually have the chance to chat through these things, but hopefully will be a good experience and can add some insight, like you said, Michael.
Absolutely. Well, we'll make sure it's a very safe space for you, but it's good.
This is about me.
Yeah, this is a very OTFC thing to try and push outside that comfort zone. And
Very true.
extend where we can.
Capacity building opportunity for me, absolutely.
So our first question was, how does OT support a child if they don't have a job? Now, when I saw this question, I initially went to, are they thinking it's occupation, therefore job, or is it how does an occupational therapist support someone who's looking for work or doesn't have work? And I don't know if you had any thoughts about maybe what's going on.
And do you know what? I think I had interpreted it in the first way that you had described that, because I feel like that's a question that we get all the time. Like, how does an occupational therapist, if occupation interpreted in this format, meaning work, supports young people? And I find myself explaining that an occupational therapist gets involved if there is anything happening in a person's life that maybe makes it tricky or stops them from doing the things that they need to do. So yes, occupation is one thing we might think of with like a return to work OT, but occupation is all the meaningful things that we have to do that occupy our lives. It might be routines at home, it might be activities that we do, leisure tasks on the weekend, and for young people, those occupations are school and making friends and communicating with those around them, engaging in the home space, building their functional independence. So actually, if there's things that make it hard for those people to do those activities, then a paediatric OT gets involved.
So I guess what I'm hearing then is the occupation, the term, is where the key point is here. Maybe either where people might get confused, they think of occupations as job, whereas occupations for us as OTs can be defined as anything that you do that is meaningful to you, that fulfills your life at a particular life stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
And that's why I see OTs working in the aged care space or in a hospital setting, mental health. The range is very broad because that opportunity to support is so holistic.
Yeah, and not occupational health and safety. That's a completely different
That's someone
field.
again.
Yeah, right. So if we're going back to then the question about how can an OT help support a child if they don't have a job, would it then be how can an OT help someone find work or support an understanding of what work might be suitable? What?
Well, I guess bringing that in a little bit more then, isn't it? So if we've got that kind of broad understanding that even if a young person does not have a job, an OT might get involved to help them at school, at home. And I think that's often, I know for me working at OTFC Parkside, the most with clients who are 9 to 12 years, that's where most of my work with them is. So we're not looking at that space about finding a job, but as they progress through those life stages, then that does become something that we can help with. I know for you at OTFC Plus, that's a huge space when we start to work with teenagers and young adults who are ready for that opportunity and how we can support that.
Yeah. So I think from my experience, my perspective, OTs can do a lot in this field.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are a number of other health professionals or others who might not be a health professional, but people with specifically there to support finding jobs. And so, for example, NDIS have funding there for school leavers. It's called the SLES, for those that might know, the School Leavers Employment Scheme. And there's other funding models, which is finding and keeping a job. So that's within NDIS plans for certain clients who may be looking for work and supported work or needing assistance to obtain that work. So where does an OT come in there? I think that's where it comes down to, as you said before, how do we make this environment, or how do we support someone to achieve those meaningful occupations?
Yeah.
So if someone does want to work as, say, a mechanic, does this person have the skills? And if they find that hard, then how does an OT build those skills? Or how can we, what we call task analysis, break down things to help this person find that? An example I think of is I got one client who absolutely, and I didn't know this, like I worked with him for so many years, and then recently found out he loves cars. So he's massively into cars, right? Like muscle cars. And I was like, why didn't you share this with me? Because, but this was something that was found out recently. And so what he's looking at is essentially going into some sort of like car detailing or something to do with cars and, assisting in that area. And it was through the conversations that you had with his treating OT that found that was an area of interest. And hey, actually, this client is so meticulous. Like his details are really fine, and he's so good at being able to identify if maybe something doesn't look right. So detailing and finding those details, perfect. And look, it doesn't always mean that person may end up there, but at least it's something meaningful that we know that we can say, okay, this person has the skills and we can support them in that manner. So that's just one example.
Yeah.
But going back to the question, if they don't have a job or they're looking for work, I think it's about trying to build their capacity to then find whether it's employment, and it doesn't have to be paid work. It could be, I often talk about volunteer work.
Yeah, that's true.
Because that's employment as well, and that gives you the opportunity to see what it's like working around other people. But you talked about mainly your age being that Parkside 9 to 12.
Yeah.
But even at that age, do you find that there are things that you're hearing from clients where it might not be a job or work per se, but skills that you go, in 10 years' time, I think that might impact work for them?
Absolutely. And the conversations start there, isn't it? Because I guess as OTs, what we do, whether it's looking for work, supporting someone in their employment or occupations more broadly, is we're understanding, well, what are their strengths, what are their interests, and what are the areas that require support? And we're constantly doing that task analysis, right? And so things can come up as we're chatting those things through to go, gosh, you know what this would lend itself really well to later? X, Y, and can kind of start to explore that with them. I have this awesome young person that I work with who is so incredibly insightful about the things that she navigates and what her developmental differences look like. And, I find myself saying to her, you would be the most amazing lived experience support person later on in life. And she, lights up at the thought of being able to share that with others. And I think what an amazing conversation to have with someone who's 11 years of age and trying to workshop what school looks like for her, and knowing that there's brilliant pathways forward that are going to tailor to her strengths and all the things that she has to offer, which is so much. Tackled that from a few ends, but I think hopefully whatever they were looking for from that, we've been able to answer that.
Yeah, great. Next question. Hi there. Do you have any recommendations on interventions I do with a child with ADHD? Big question.
It's a big question. I think we both saw that too and go, gosh, we're probably going back to that definition of OT that we spoke about in how we can assist within occupations. It's probably that understanding of, well, what is it that young person might be finding a little bit trickier, or they're managing differences within that they're looking for that support? Is it in initiating tasks, being able to workshop that to complete it as they've been asked, attending at school, being able to sit for extended periods? How can we explore and do that analysis of what can we put in place to facilitate some of those things they want and need to do, and what's making that hard for them that we can support that development with?
So I guess with ADHD, and I guess any sort of neurodivergence is potential challenges or differences in executive function.
Yeah.
Is that where some of the biggest barriers lie for some of those
when you're
clients?
looking at things like attention and working memory and those things, for a lot of these young people, it's they have to battle against their own neurochemistry sometimes to manage those elements as we expect them, I guess thinking about those neurotypical expectations at times. So going, well, how can we make this work for them with what they need? What are the barriers at this point in time? And how can we do things differently in a way that makes more sense for them and meets their needs?
So there's obviously a lot of, ADHD itself, there's a lot of support out there. I know that ADHD Support Australia has information about some of the recommended resources and recommended treatment approaches. And, within that, they mention about occupational therapy.
Yeah.
Amongst other things, psychology and other, developmental education and some of those other supports. But, in terms of recommendations and interventions, I think sometimes it's hard because I would say that, I've got clients who, I'm going to be biased. I think everyone would benefit from OT,
yeah.
but there are some that might benefit from another therapy first as opposed to something else. So it can be tricky to say that if, say, someone does have ADHD, that this would be the best thing for them to do as a, silver bullet. But from my experience, when I'm thinking of ADHD, I'm thinking of strengths. I'm thinking of strengths-based, and I think it's a really neuroaffirming way of looking at it is going, if you have a person who maybe has some challenges, then let's start by going, what are their strengths? And we tie that into, focusing on those. And then, you give that person the confidence to go, well, these things are challenging, but I also have these strengths that can help carry me through that. Yeah. Executive functions are, I always talk about to parents about these are things that just don't get taught. You can't just automatically all of a sudden, learn how to plan something or learn how to organize your thoughts or your emotions or, cognitively organize things, memory and that sort of stuff. That, you learn that over time. And it really comes back to, and it might be a bit of a throwaway line, but how those things are modeled by other people. Yeah. As well, and whether that's parents, whether that is, sometimes teachers, therapists can certainly support in that as well, but it's quite a holistic way of managing some of those things. So
yeah, for sure. I think we're always trying to understand too, how can we meet that young person where they're at? And then we're looking to break tasks down in a way that is tailored for what their needs are to then support that modelling and scaffolding exactly like you said, and then building that capacity towards those goals that we're working on. But I think, with any young person, it's worth reaching out if there are some things you're wondering, how might this service support my young person and my family and with where we're at the moment, and going like, these are the things that we're navigating. This is where we'd like to see some of those supports come into play, and then seeing what that can look like from there. OT is often a good place to start though, isn't it? Because I guess that holistic approach, and we can understand, well, if it's not us, perhaps from what you've described, psychology might be of benefit, or a developmental educator in the school might be really useful. But it can just be, a place to start.
Yeah, I think so. And often the first port of call for any sort of potential, someone's experiencing a challenge or something that is constantly, difficult in maybe it's a family environment or a home environment is to go through, your GP to then find a service or to go through that process. And they often have, I guess, referrals to other people they may refer to. But, for example, you don't need a referral to go to an OT. You don't need a specific referral for that. But there are certainly supports around that. It doesn't need to be one, as you said, one specific service. It could be a range of things. But if you notice something, I think you try and address that early. And what we know is early intervention goes a long way to supporting people. So.
And actually, just before we move on to the next question, I do have conversations from families quite often that are, wanting to understand what those next steps forward look like. And so they'll reach out and they'll explain to me a little bit about what they're managing. And then we can go from there like, actually, I think OT would be really supportive, or have you considered this? And we can kind of help map that out together. So don't ever feel like if you're listening, if you wanted to reach out to understand that a little bit more, we can chat through what that looks like for you and help put those next steps in place.
Part of our role.
Yeah,
psychoeducation. Okay, got one more question here about continence care plans. Do you supply continence care plans? So my understanding of continence care plans as a health professional is, I guess my question here is, I'm guessing the person is asking in the context of like the school environment. That's where you would see majority of continence care plans. And for a young person, you can have continence care plans for aging people and older populations as well. But I think specifically for a younger person here, I don't know if have you ever done a continence care plan before?
Do you know what? I actually, speaking really openly, I haven't needed to support any of my families in that specifically, but I know lots of our OTs who do have young people with those support requirements, and they can get involved to facilitate that, support that understanding and put those things in place. Yeah. So I guess it's something that we do as a holistic part of our service, but speaking about other services isn't something that we would potentially do exclusively for someone, if that makes sense.
Yeah, probably. I'd say probably, I guess in our space, probably not. But I know that there might be other spaces that might do that.
Yeah.
But what often happens, and I've done a couple in my time, which the time I've been an OT, having only done a couple of continence care plans is not a lot. But my experience of it has very much been a family in a school put that together, and they work on that together, and they get the insight from a allied health professional. Sometimes it's a nurse, a continence care nurse, an OT. Generally, the most common ones because it's quite functional and daily living. So there's a template, and you fill that template in. And so as an OT, what I found I do is look at things like, are there any accommodations, say, whether it's a particular environment, say using a different toilet, or just being aware of things like frequency or prompting for when to go, or if they are supported through continence products, nappies and whatnot, then that allowance for that, and to make sure that's part of it.
Yeah.
It's just actually being really quite, I guess, comprehensive in the plan. It's from memory. I haven't seen one for a little while, but from memory, they're quite structured. And I think the way that we fill those in makes it very clear that this person needs this support in these ways at these times.
Yeah.
So, the aim of it is to provide that person continence aids when they're at school, to make it less stressful, to make it easier for everyone supporting them. So in terms of supplying them, we do, but in conjunction with what a school would do.
Yeah.
And we just provide, I guess, our insight there as well.
Yeah. And I know, I guess, like, to complement that as well, we're, building those skills that we need to grow that independence in toileting too. So, our body awareness, our postural control, our balance, bilateral coordination to use both sides of the body, all those things that we're bringing together and doing tasks like this. So as like a longer term goal, I suppose. But once again, meeting that young person with where they're at and what they need, or with the intent though of giving them the tools over time to have that be something that they can work towards potentially.
I guess that's a bigger question in itself.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Skills required for toileting.
Yeah. We've got some great videos on our page if you're looking for tips and tricks around
absolutely. That. Yeah. That's why we have a family consultant that can go into the home as well.
And she's amazing. But that's such a wealth of knowledge.
That's where it is really important to break those things down. We talk about task analysis, finding a job as a child. It's very much the same. These are occupations, things we do day-to-day life.
Absolutely.
Going to the toilet, I don't know, we do that every day, hopefully. Some people find it hard to do every day, and that's part of the plan. So,
yeah, it is too.
All those things factor in there.
Michael, any more questions?
Actually, that is all for this week. I'm sorry, Eleanor.
Oh, look, well, we've got our next episode coming. So we can get into some more then, right? We've got a few things to talk about.
Yeah, I believe so. So thankfully, this is not scripted at all, by the way. We are going to talk about impulsivity, screen time, and how a young person who's settled at school might not be at home. Yeah,
that'll be a good one. I think that's something that we see all of the time. Very common. So it'll be great to chat that through.
Okay.
In the next episode.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Eleanor, for today.
First episode done.
That's done. New format, new staff, and I think a new way forward.
Would love any feedback as well. Send it through.
Sure, yeah. If you don't like my voice as much as Eleanor's, I will make sure that she's on the microphone more, and I'll give her the better mic as well. Otherwise, and again, any questions you might have, DM us on Instagram or send it through podcast@otfcgroup.au, and we will make a time to put that together and come up with some responses.
Yeah. And hey, is there one last little thing that we need to do? A special tradition at the end?
Yeah, normally we do a little, you can do it this time.
Can I do it this time?
Please, having worked with a young person, so you go.
Yeah, I'm going to give, just to round things off, a little shout out to our friend Fletch. Hope you're having a lovely evening, whatever you're doing listening to this, and I'll see you soon.
And sorry, Fletch, it's been a long time since we've done our last episode, so apologies for the
It's the only
hiatus.
reason they brought me on, Fletch, is so that I can do the shout out at the end.
This is true. All right, thanks all. See you next time.
See you later.